The Galactic Council's misdirection. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, an ocean of stars scattered across the black canvas of the universe. There, suspended in the cold emptiness, hung the enormous Grand Council space station, an ancient structure of breathtaking beauty. Its crystalline spires rose like elegant fingers, reaching toward the heavens, while its gleaming metallic surfaces caught the light of not one, but three suns. The station itself seemed to pulse with life, shimmering with colors that changed depending on the angle of light, like a jewel set against the dark velvet of space. For centuries, it had been a symbol of the power and wisdom of the galaxy's most influential species. But today, the station held more than just the glistening radiance of distant stars. It was alive with anticipation. All eyes were fixed on a new arrival, a ship from a species considered by many to be nothing more than a curiosity. Humans. The Peacekeeper, a sleek human vessel, slowly approached the station. Its dark, reflective hull shimmered as it cut through the space, gliding with a grace and precision that surprised many observers. There were no rough edges, no sign of crude or hastily made craftsmanship. For a species so young, so seemingly out of their depth in galactic politics, their ship radiated a quiet confidence, a skill that belied their apparent immaturity in the eyes of the galaxy's old powers. Inside the ship, Ambassador James Miller stood before the viewport, watching the massive station grow closer. His expression was calm, but his eyes, sharp, alert, and full of experience, took in every detail, every movement of the ship's sensors. Miller was not a man given to displays of emotion, and his weathered face showed the marks of a life lived with its share of hardship. Behind him, his team stood in perfect formation. Though they wore civilian attire, there was no mistaking the military precision in their posture. These were not diplomats by training, but soldiers, men and women who had seen conflict and survived. Their clothing was simple, practical, and starkly different from the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the alien delegates who awaited them. Miller straightened his suit as he turned to his team. His voice was low, deliberate, and filled with quiet authority. "Remember," he spoke, his words resonating through the quiet of the ship, "we're here to observe as much as we are to talk. Stay sharp." He paused, his gaze sweeping over each member of his team, and then added, "This is as much about learning as it is about negotiating." Behind him, his second-in-command, Thomas Reed, nodded without a word, his eyes scanning the data displays. The rest of the team followed suit, their focused gazes betraying no hint of apprehension. They had prepared for this moment their entire lives. And now, in the face of it, there was only determination. The airlock on the Peacekeeper hissed open, and the human delegation filed out into the grand chamber of the council station. The floor beneath their feet gleamed with a polished sheen, and the chamber's high ceiling stretched upward in intricate arches, giving the space a sense of grandeur that was impossible to ignore. The chamber was massive, vast enough to accommodate the numerous delegates who waited at the far end. Representatives from over 30 different civilizations, each as diverse in appearance as they were in culture. Some were humanoid, some insectoid, others entirely alien in ways the humans could not yet fully comprehend. The Hive Mind Collective's delegates, towering insect-like beings with shimmering exoskeletons and compound eyes, stood in a tight formation, their many limbs flicking and moving in intricate, synchronized patterns. Their presence alone was enough to unsettle even the bravest souls, but Miller showed no sign of hesitation. They tracked every movement with an unsettling precision, their antennae twitching at the slightest shift in the human delegation's formation. Farther down the room, the Crystal Empire's representatives stood like beams of living light. Their bodies were made of radiant, ever-shifting crystal, each movement sending shimmering prisms of light dancing across the walls. They were beautiful in a way that made the room feel otherworldly, yet there was an air of aloofness about them, as if they regarded the others with an enigmatic, almost detached superiority. And then, there were the representatives of the Stellar Republic, a vast alliance of countless species, their varied forms filling the chamber. Some humanoid, others utterly foreign to human eyes. Each one had a unique air about them, a quiet intensity that suggested far more complexity beneath the surface than their outward appearances might imply. At the very front of this delegation, High Counselor Bright Crystal stepped forward to greet the human ambassadors. His form was a towering crystalline figure, and as he moved, light refracted off him in dazzling displays. He exuded an aura of regal authority, and his voice, when it came, resonated through the chamber like the chime of a bell. "Welcome, humans of Earth, to the Grand Council Station," he said, his words measured and careful. "We are pleased you could make this journey." Miller studied the High Counselor carefully, noting the slight pause before the words, "pleased you could make this journey," a carefully chosen phrase, one that seemed to carry more weight than it should. He returned the greeting with a smile, but his expression remained neutral. "The pleasure is ours, High Counselor. Earth has long awaited this day." As Miller finished speaking, an unsettling sound echoed from the hive mind delegation. One of the larger members, named Deep Thought, clicked its mandibles together, an eerie sound that filled the room. "Such a long journey for such a young species," it rasped, its voice sending a shiver down Miller's spine. "We trust the trip wasn't too taxing for your primitive drives." Miller's smile never wavered. "Our ship served us well," he said, his voice smooth and steady. "Thank you for your concern." He motioned to his team. "Allow me to introduce Earth's delegation." Behind him, Reed surveyed the room, his eyes flicking from delegate to delegate, noting the subtle shifts in posture and the faint exchanges between them. It was impossible not to notice how the Crystal Empire's representatives seemed to communicate in a code of their own, their movements synchronized in a way that suggested they were not merely observing the humans, but sharing information with one another. Reed's sharp eyes also caught the formation of the hive mind delegates, who had positioned themselves in such a way that the humans were surrounded on all sides, ensuring that they were always within the collective's line of sight. The Stellar Republic delegates, for their part, subtly adjusted their positions, inching toward the exits as if preparing for a sudden shift in the room's dynamics. But even as the formalities played out with the precision expected of such an important occasion, there was a palpable tension in the air, a quiet undercurrent that only a few, like Miller, Reed, and their team, could feel. They were being sized up, calculated, and their every word, every gesture, was being scrutinized. The welcome ceremony proceeded with all the expected pomp and circumstance, but the humans could sense that beneath the surface, something far more ominous was brewing. As they were escorted to their quarters, a luxurious suite, but one strategically located in a part of the station that could be easily isolated should the need arise, Miller couldn't help but feel that the game had already begun. But he had no intention of playing by the rules set for him by those who thought of Earth as nothing more than an insignificant blip in the vast expanse of the galaxy. His eyes narrowed as the doors to their quarters slid closed behind them. Tomorrow, they would show the galaxy just how wrong it was about them. The tensions unfold. The next morning broke with an eerie quietness aboard the Grand Council Station. The sprawling expanse of the station's observation deck, visible from the human delegation's quarters, was filled with alien ships, each with its own design and intent. Some drifted silently, while others hovered with purpose, their engines humming in the depths of space, suggesting movements and strategies not yet made clear. But it wasn't the ships that caught Ambassador James Miller's attention. It was the subtle shift in the atmosphere within the station itself. A quiet tension, like the calm before a storm, hung in the air. Miller had not slept much the night before. He stood by the viewport, his eyes scanning the ever-changing landscape of stars, his mind working through the details of their mission. He had expected political maneuvering, but what he had sensed the previous day, beneath the surface of the pleasantries, had been something far more unsettling. It wasn't just the subtle condescension from the hive mind delegates or the polished politeness of the Crystal Empire that had left him uneasy. It was the growing realization that Earth was being viewed not as an equal but as a target. The galaxy's ancient powers were watching them closely, calculating the right moment to push Earth into a corner. Behind him, his team assembled silently, their own thoughts mirroring Miller's. Each member of the human delegation carried the quiet professionalism of seasoned officers. Thomas Reed, his second in command, stood with his back to the wall. His eyes narrowed as he analyzed the data on his tablet. Lissa Barnes, the team's communications expert, was already monitoring encrypted alien transmissions, listening intently for any hints of a deeper agenda. Every member had their role, and every role was essential to their mission. They were all aware that the next steps they took would determine the course of Earth's future in galactic politics. "We need to be prepared for anything," Miller said, breaking the silence. "The peaceful gestures we saw yesterday were nothing but a facade. The real question is, what comes next?" Reed nodded, his eyes scanning the tablet before him. "The surveillance measures in place are more thorough than we expected. They're watching every move we make. The Council already knows we're onto them." Barnes turned slightly, glancing over her shoulder. "There are encrypted transmissions among the delegates. Patterns have been able to decipher. They're planning something big. The fleet movements are more than just routine patrols. It's a buildup. They're positioning themselves for something." Miller paused, letting the words settle in his mind. "And they're expecting us to fall in line. They think we'll bend to their will, sign their agreements, and leave ourselves open to their control. But we won't," Reed said flatly. "Not if we can help it." "Exactly," Miller replied, his voice filled with determination. "Let them think they're winning. Let them believe we're just a naive species still learning the rules of galactic politics. They won't realize their mistake until it's too late." Later that day, the delegation was summoned to the Grand Meeting Hall once again. The massive room was even more imposing than before, its high walls lined with towering holographic displays of galactic charts, star maps, and trade statistics. The projections floated in the air like digital constellations, casting a faint, eerie glow over the chamber. The hum of the station's systems was constant in the background, a reminder that this was not a place of peace, but one of power, a place where empires were made or broken. The council members were already seated when the human delegation entered, their figures encased in ceremonial robes and armor that gleamed under the artificial light. High Counselor Bright Crystal stood at the center, his crystalline form shining like a beacon, while the hive mind representative, Deep Thought, stood with its insect-like limbs arranged in an unsettling symmetry. The Stellar Republic's representatives, a mixed species of humanoids and non-humanoids, waited for the proceedings to begin, their quiet presence a reminder of just how vast and diverse the galaxy truly was. Bright Crystal spoke first, his voice filling the hall with a resonance that could only be achieved by one who had mastered the art of command. "Welcome, humans of Earth. We trust your accommodations have been suitable." His words were calm, measured, and polite, but there was an underlying tension in his voice, an edge that Miller couldn't quite place. "The arrangements have been perfect, High Counselor," Miller replied, his tone even. "We are grateful for your hospitality." Bright Crystal's eyes flickered briefly, as if searching for any sign of defiance, before he continued. "As you can see, we've prepared a proposal that will ensure your species' safe development within the broader galactic framework. We suggest that Earth remain within the protected development category for the foreseeable future. Your expansion, as we have outlined, should be limited to your current 3 colony worlds. This will ensure that your species remains safe and free from the dangers of the unknown regions of space." Miller's brow furrowed slightly. He had seen the data Bright Crystal referred to, and he knew there was something off about it. Earth's defensive capabilities, which had been proven time and again against pirate raids in the Outer Rim, were completely omitted from these charts. The humans were not weak. In fact, they had more than proven their resilience, their ingenuity, and their capacity for survival. Yet the council members, with all their age and experience, still seemed to underestimate humanity's true potential. Reed's eyes narrowed as he looked over the statistics projected in midair. "It seems your analysis is incomplete," he said, his voice cold but polite. "Our merchants have reported significantly higher success rates in the last year than what your charts show. And as for our military..." Deep Thought's antennae twitched with an unsettling movement. "Young species often misinterpret market fluctuations," it said, its voice a dry rasp. "Your limited experience in galactic commerce leads you to overestimate your success." Its mandibles clicked, and Miller felt a slight shiver of unease. The hive mind's condescension was almost palpable, as though they had already decided that Earth's leaders were unworthy of their true attention. "While your perspective is noted," Miller replied, "our analysis suggests that the trade opportunities Earth provides are far more lucrative than these reports indicate. We are willing to share our own data for review. Surely that would help correct any discrepancies." Sharp Edge, the trade minister of the Crystal Empire, chimed in. "To allow access to such data would violate numerous intergalactic protocols," he said with a tone that suggested not only authority, but a hint of superiority. "You must understand that your developmental stage prevents you from fully comprehending the intricacies of galactic economics." As the conversation continued, it was clear that the Council was playing their hand carefully. Every word was chosen with precision, every movement calculated to maintain control over the proceedings. But even as the humans nodded politely, agreeing to some terms while questioning others, they were observing, collecting information, and learning. And every move the Council made was being recorded and analyzed for weaknesses. The humans had come not just to negotiate, but to reveal the true nature of the Council's intentions. While the Council believed they had the upper hand, they were blind to the quiet confidence growing within the human delegation. They thought Earth was still a fledgling species, unable to comprehend the full scope of galactic politics. But what they didn't understand was that humanity had been forged through conflict, tested by war, and tempered by hardship. And this was just the beginning of a much larger game. The ultimate test of humanity. The following days passed in a flurry of diplomatic exchanges, each one more charged with tension than the last. The grand meeting hall of the Galactic Council remained filled with holographic projections of star systems, trade routes, and resource maps, all displayed with meticulous precision. The tone of the Council meetings had shifted from formal courtesy to something far more ominous. Every word, every gesture seemed to carry hidden meanings, subtle threats veiled beneath polished smiles and forced politeness. Ambassador James Miller knew they were walking a fine line, one that could tip either way at any moment. Miller stood before the table in the council chamber, his fingers drumming rhythmically against the polished surface as the latest round of talks unfolded. The hive mind delegation maintained their rigid formation, watching the humans with unnerving intensity. Bright Crystal, the leader of the Crystal Empire, spoke again, his voice as serene as it was dangerous. "We have reviewed your objections to the terms of the protection agreement, humans," Bright Crystal said, his crystalline form gleaming like 1,000 diamonds in the soft light of the chamber. "And we have concluded that there is no further room for negotiation. You will submit to our guidance and agree to the conditions outlined. Earth's resources are needed for the greater good of the galaxy, and your species will benefit from the protection and stability we provide." Miller's mind raced as he considered the implications of Bright Crystal's words. The humans had already uncovered much about the true nature of the Council's intentions. The protection the Council offered was nothing more than a veiled attempt at control, an effort to strip Earth of its resources, while forcing them to remain within a limited sphere of influence. Earth was not being invited into the galactic fold as an equal partner. It was being coerced into servitude under the guise of diplomacy. The human delegation had come to the Grand Council station not to accept terms, but to gather information. They had done their research, quietly analyzing the Council's every move, and what they had learned was chilling. The Council had already positioned fleets near Earth's borders, ships that were disguised as routine patrols, but were in fact part of a much larger plan to force Earth into compliance. They were preparing for war should Earth refuse to fall in line. Yet even with this knowledge, Miller remained calm. He had learned long ago that true power lay not in brute force, but in the ability to control perception. Earth had come to the negotiation table not as a supplicant, but as a player, one that had its own stake in the game. The Council had underestimated them, and now it was time for them to realize the mistake they had made. "Your terms are unacceptable," Miller said, his voice steady, his gaze unflinching. "We will not submit to your control. Earth will not be a resource farm for your so-called greater good. If this is your final offer, then I must respectfully decline." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment, the room fell silent. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Deep thought, the hive mind representative, clicked its mandibles, its many eyes narrowing in what could only be described as disdain. Sharp Edge, the trade minister, chimed in with a voice dripping with contempt. "Your defiance is noted, human," Sharp Edge said, his voice cold. "But you are gravely mistaken if you believe you can defy the will of the galaxy. You are but a fledgling species, far out of your depth. You will regret this decision." Miller stood his ground, his eyes locked on Sharp Edge. "We are not children, and we are not afraid. Your fleets may be at our doorstep, but we are not without resources of our own. We came here to give you a warning. Earth will not be bullied, nor will it be dictated to. We will fight for our freedom, no matter the cost." At that moment, the Council's facade of calm shattered. The true nature of their intentions had been exposed, and the realization hit them with the force of a shockwave. The humans, whom they had viewed as weak and naive, were far stronger than they had ever imagined. Earth had no intention of being their pawn. The Council had underestimated the indomitable spirit of humanity, a species forged in the crucible of survival and defiance. The tension in the room was palpable, a crackling energy that threatened to explode at any moment. Bright Crystal's voice grew louder, tinged with barely contained fury. "You dare challenge us?" he asked, his crystalline body flickering with bursts of light as his anger built. "You are nothing but a small, insignificant species on the edge of galactic history. You have no place here, and you will submit to the will of the Council." But Miller was not intimidated. His resolve was unshakable. "You may think you have power over us," he said, his voice rising with the intensity of his words. "But you are wrong. Humanity does not bend to threats, and we do not accept oppression. You may have fleets, and you may have power, but you will never control us. We will never submit to you." The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the Council's response. For the first time, the delegates from the Stellar Republic, the Hive Mind, and the Crystal Empire seemed uncertain. They had expected a different response, one of fear, perhaps even capitulation. But instead, they had been met with defiance, unwavering, unyielding defiance. It was then that the true nature of humanity was revealed. The human delegation had not come to the Council to beg for approval or seek permission to exist. They had come to stand as equals, to demand the respect they had earned through centuries of perseverance, resilience, and ingenuity. They had come not as a naive species, but as a force to be reckoned with. Miller's voice rang out, filled with the fire of 1,000 battles fought and won. "You want Earth to submit. You want us to bow to your so-called protection. Then you'll have to make us. But know this, every step you take toward that goal will be met with the full might of humanity's will. We are not the weak, helpless creatures you thought we were. We are humanity, and we will fight for our freedom." As the Council members exchanged looks of shock and disbelief, it became clear to them that the game had changed. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They were no longer the prey. They were a force of nature, a relentless tide of determination that could not be stopped. And as the delegates filed out of the chamber, a sense of unease settled over them. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. The Council had misjudged humanity, and now, it was too late to turn back. The war for Earth's freedom had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again.